And first, let's talk about actually when the settlers first came over, there was an average of 20 to 25 trees per acre. Now it's like, could be hundreds. And this was from the land management from the indigenous tribes. You know, when you burn, you prevent certain saplings from coming up. You get rid of all the brush. On average, would burn about 4 million acres a year, the indigenous tribes. Prescribed burn control. Guess how many acres burned in California's worst fire year?
Okay.
3 million acres.
Okay, it was the
total in 1 year.
So let's go back. How many prescribed acres would the indigenous people burn?
4 million. Cumulative acreage of wildfires in the worst year in California.
Was only 1 million.
No, was 3 million total acres burned in 1 year.
So 75% of what they would normally prescribe burn.
Yes.
Pre-industrialization.
Yes.
Wow.
And here we are, like the worst year ever, 3 million, when that was nothing.
Well,
and obviously there wasn't as populated, and they had big open areas. And so just recently, California finally realized, oh my God, what have we done? We've prohibited this for so long, and now we're paying the consequences. I got into this and looked at things differently. Now when I drive, I don't say, oh, look how beautiful the forest, oh, look at that, the trees and the brush. I say, look at that fuel. When I look around now, I look in aspect of what's going to go quick. So and wow, they haven't managed this area. That brush is way too overgrown. Crown fire carried unless there's ground fuels. So when you eliminate all the brush, it can't be carried.
You have no heat rising up to then produce the fires.
There you go, exactly.
And so the state of California is now doing land clearing, you were saying?
They're doing it all now. And that's why, and I can't even think of all the new bills and whatnot. There's millions of dollars now being funneled into California, whether it be federal government, state government, through nonprofits. So what they want to do now is there's a pilot program in California to encourage private landowners to do their own prescribed burning. So whether you own 5 acres, 100 acres, a few acres, the goal is to have 1 million a million acres burned per year. And that started 2021. So I'm pretty proud that for Placer County, I was the guinea pig for that pilot program.
All right.
And so part of this program is to figure out the barriers of entry for homeowners, whether it be, of course, how do you burn? It's scary, right? Oh, I'm going to burn my property. Well, and even within prescribed burning, so there is a little butting heads between certain, folks, indigenous folks on what cultural or prescribed burning is versus. So now that CAL FIRE and the big corporate guys are learning and jumping in, and this is going to tie into what happened with my 15-acre burn we did pilot program. You set a prescription. They're called RX burns, right? Prescription. And you have a certain target goal for how many acres you want to burn. And if you have a lot of people that are supposed to work on the burn, it's very difficult because you can project by looking at the weather and see what the relative humidity, what the wind's going to be. It has to be just right. The ground moisture, how far down, is it still wet? Is the duff layer, which is like the forest floor? All these things. There's so many components, and the problem is you can plan something with 20, 50 people to be on it, and then that morning the weather changes and you got to call it off. And so think about how flexible everyone involved needs to be. And maybe this burn's an hour from where the people are traveling to. So with my burn, this was such a big deal because it was Placer County, Placer RCD, Resources Conservation District. That's what I work with. They're the ones that got the grant funding for it. I worked with Cordy Craig. She's a young woman like me, and she's the one that set this up. And she hired burn bosses. So we got 2 burn bosses. There's only 5 certified burn bosses in California. So we'll touch up on that later.
Shout out to you. Swooped up 40% of the available market.
No, I'm not a burn boss.
No, I'm saying, well, you got 2 of them on your property.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, actually, one was technically still in training and not certified. One official of Burn
Okay.
Boss.
They're certified
still
now.
a quarter.
Two.
Yeah. And then we hired a couple private engines. We also worked with some researchers at UC Davis. They're very interested to see the ecological effects before and after prescribed fire. So they had people out. God, I think we had like 40 people. And we had to cancel it one time because the weather changed. So then this is 2021 in December. It didn't really rain that much earlier that year. And
No,
it
was
hadn't.
late rain.
And it didn't rain too, it was so dry that if we got any rain right before that burn, which we did, it still didn't really saturate the ground. Long story short, we probably shouldn't have burned the day we did. It was oddly warm as well, like high 70s, but it was an $18,000 cost for everything. And we had so many people, we rolled with it. And we really wanted to finish these 15 acres. That was the goal. So in retrospect, what I've learned is you don't push it. If the conditions aren't right, who cares what your goal is for how many acres you need to get done? The goal is to have slow backing fire. Okay, so these are all fire terms, right? Head fire, backing fire, things like that. Slow backing fire with low, flame lengths.
What does the backing part mean?
Backing means it's going against the wind. So a head fire will, let's say, for example, be traveling with the wind or up a hill. So if you have a hill that you're burning, you want to start burning it at the top of the hill because it
has to come down.
It has to come down, but it comes down really slow. So the way the wind works with hills and whatnot, and I'm not a fire expert. I'm actually going to school and learning all this right now. So I might not have all the terminology, but if you start in a canyon and the fire's down here, it can, so what happened during the mosquito fire where I actually got evacuated.
Yeah, Mosquito Ridge.
What happened with that one, it started near the Forest Hill area and then it moved towards El Dorado County. And after about a week, it had jumped the American River to the other side. And you know what hot shots do, like firing operations.
We have a buddy who was one.
Yeah, so what they were doing, they had a firing operation on the opposite side of the river, and they were firing back. Well, something happened with the wind, and it jumped the river. And what happens is when that inversion layer lifts of that smoke, it causes fires to just turn back to infernos. So it jumped the American River and raced to Forest Hill, which was only like 3 or 4 miles.
Raced back up the hill.
Raced back up the hill on the part of Forest Hill that didn't burn on its way down. And within 3 hours, it ran 4 miles. And I'm sitting there, and I'll show you pictures after this. You can see the view I have. 'Cause I'm at the top of my mountain. All you see is the smoke, and they had the VLATs, those huge planes dropping the
Is it
retardant?
the red powder? Yeah.
Yeah, the retardant. They were, I don't know, were there 4 or 5 planes that day? I think there's only like 12 total. Again, I might have my numbers wrong, but they were coming in tandem, back and forth, drop. We're watching this, and we were under mandatory evacuation. The sheriffs were coming up and going door to door, telling everyone to
get
evacuate.
out.
What's ironic is the 2 sheriffs that actually came and raided my farm
were the ones that were like,
they're there. Yeah,
hey, knock, knock.
We're actually cool now because I did my probation.
What's
and
up?
all
We
that.
still like you. We're not going to let you die. Can you please come with us?
I don't want to go down the journey too much of your story, but I think there's a couple things here. Okay, first of all, what is a burn boss?
So a burn boss is someone that has been certified to write prescriptions for fires, for prescribed fire.
Okay.
So it's someone that can...
It's a burn doctor. They can prescribe you to be able to light the fire in an appropriate way.
So exactly. They'll come and they'll look at the terrain. They'll look at the type of trees there. They have all their formulas. They'll tell you what your expected tree mortality death will be, mortality percentage will be. There's just all these figures and whatnot. And so they can either hire them to be there the day of the burn where they take more liability, or they just write you your prescription.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the other question that I had for you was, it seems like to me, our current sort of consumer culture doesn't necessarily align with the culture that the indigenous people have had when it comes to realizing what the conditions of a fire and a burn are and when you should or should not do it. So, for example, you were saying like there's basically like a $15,000 cost. You had all these people, you had all these overhead versus, the sort of benefit of the community and the indigenous people doing sort of one for all and all for one.
For free.
Yeah, they were able to maybe take their time a little bit more effectively.
So, and that's why it's important, and that's what what I'm going to be helping doing is educating homeowners. It's really the power needs to be in the hands of the homeowner, because they make their own schedule. They're home every day. Typically, they can maybe change something. And maybe, okay, so that burn, it was a lot of people. It was too hot. I had quite a few ponderosa pines die. And they were trying to hurry up and get it done. So they were doing dot fire all throughout versus, there's different methods of dropping fire.
What's dot fire?
Dot fire is when they literally go out and just do dots in the ground.
Got it.
And then there's spike fire, which is more, like almost like a V type thing. But they're doing their dot fires, let's say here and here. And then with the weather, the heat, let's say the fire joined here. And when it joined here, the flame lengths were they weren't super high, but you'd be surprised how hot that heat rises. Let's say from even 6, God, I wish I had the figures.
That's
6 foot
fire
flame
races
length.
Uphill.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I had a bunch of trees. I mean, we had to have an engine out for 5 days almost, because trees were torching in the middle of the night. So, okay. So this brings me to, so that was trial 1. Our next one, it was just me and 2 other people from Placer RCD. And we only burned 1 acre that day, but the weather was perfect. It was just us 3. Of course, we have, I have water and totes and pumps and stuff. You always make sure there's fire breaks and you have extra water on hand. Or I, of course, have equipment. There's
backup plans.
For our urban listeners who don't know what a fire break is, can you explain that, please?
Oh, fire break is when you clear the foliage off the ground. Anywhere between, I don't know, it could be 3 or 5 feet, depending on how crazy you think your fire is going to get. You just don't want anything to carry the fire. So you want to take it down to dirt. So when I did another few prescribed burns this past year, and even the areas where I had cut my fire breaks a year and a half ago, I had, it wasn't fully thick again, but I had to take my mulcher and
you had to do some more work on the land.
Yeah, things come back. But the good thing about is a lot of the saplings that were growing, the bird knocked it out, and then the saplings were smaller.
So we can control the amount of trees that are on the land, which ultimately would contribute to these mega fires if we're not taking care of the ground, and we have a lot of trees. It's a 1-2 knockout punch for some fire that's going to move really quick.
Well, so I have a rental, an Airbnb, and everyone that comes is coming from the Bay Area. Which is where I'm from. I'm from the peninsula. And people ask, what are you doing up here? Or I take them for a farm tour and they'll see the blackened area. There was a fire. And I said, well, actually, it was a prescribed burn.
Let me tell you.
So I ask them if they know what that is. They don't know. And, right off the bat, people from the city would think like, well, why do I care about prescribed burning? And, and I said, well,
remember that time? Yeah.
Well, how would you feel if you have a trip to Tahoe that's planned in the summer and all of a sudden, due to the smoke advisory, your trip's canceled? Or even in San Francisco, there could be smoke from whatever fires in the North Bay, East Bay, and you can't go outside. I said, so forest fires do affect you in a way.
Yeah.
And there has to be a whole paradigm shift of what we think. When I'm on Instagram and I drop a tree, I get so many messages. I hope you're planting 10 to replace that one. I go, actually,
people suck.
You know what? They don't suck. They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. And
that is so much better of a way to say exactly that.